Okay, so yeah, I didn't have a vlog on Kami no Kiba last week. This was because since the show was wrapping up, I figured it'd be better to do the last two episodes together because I figured there was going to be a lot of plot points that were going to be hit hard and fast, and they were. Fusa came back saying she was on Ginga's side to help him out against the Watchdog's forces, and guy who starts with an R. I can still not get his name right. Here I am pulling up the wiki again because I think they should have it at this point. Yeah, and Rosen. That's the guy's name. I keep forgetting the guy's name. And, well, it goes all pear-shaped, as I figured it was going to, in that how, Toma thinks that they can solve all this by actually just going to the Watchdogs. They'll show that he's actually human, they'll show the other people are actually human, they're not actually possessed horrors, and this will all work out. And Fusa still doesn't just use the spell on him, which could resolve all of this either one way or the other. Either Ginga's not turning people back into horrors, and they're like, it'll break him, but they can deal with it before it becomes a huge situation, or they're actually human and this whole thing is all for nothing, and they just need to take care of the Ginga inside Ginga that is actually the horror, even if it might banish his own essence or abilities, and they can walk out of this free, or they can head off what might actually be happening with the darkness that Ginga's scar is absorbing, so that might actually be leading to Messiah. No, that's not how they go with this. Instead, Ginga has an all is lost moment, thinking that Fusa has betrayed him as well and is taking Toma to his death now. And, of course, because he's been filled with all this self-righteousness thanks to episode 8, with the priest giving him an ego about how only he has this power, yeah, it ends up going badly. And in fact, he finally just goes and straight up kills Fusa. I'm forgetting the exact divide where that happens, either the end of 11 or the beginning of 12. But either way, yeah, he cuts down all the guards and finally kills Fusa, which is finally the trigger point for, yeah, that actually was the end of episode 11. It is finally the trigger point for Horror Ginga to confront Mikage Ginga about everything that's going on, everything that's happened, and who actually owns the body. And here comes Ginga with the revelation. Yeah, this isn't some deep-rooted plan for Messiah to be reawoken. This isn't some scheme to use horror essence to break free from his reincarnated prison. This is just Amelie trying to resurrect her dead lover inside of the one he partially reincarnated as. His future human self, his previous human self reincarnated as Ginga Mikage, whereas his horror essence was held, I don't know, elsewhere, and just had to be cultivated by Amelie killing his father and basically putting enough darkness and doubt in him to basically feed Jinga's own resurrection. And here comes the kicker. The dark essence that's been dragged out of all the people he saved from turning into horrors, yeah, it's as the Watchdogs believed. He was just suppressing their horror essence while making them seem as humans, and the right trigger, say Ginga the horror releasing that dark essence back to them, would revert them to being horrors. Everyone Ginga had believed to have saved throughout the series actually wasn't, and like him, had become sleeper agents for the horror within them, and thus had since been gathering darkness when no one was not gathering darkness, consuming and eating people and growing stronger while no one was the wiser. That is a bit of speculation on my part, but it would make all kinds of sense considering what we saw a couple episodes ago with the thief who turned his prospective lover and then later lover into a horror as well by still generating Inga and dark yang energy, which births horrors. So yeah. And of course, this includes Toma, who in a break, definitely the ultimate blue screen of death moment for Ginga Mikage, yeah, turns Toma back into a horror at the moment after Toma he actually does say that Ginga is not actually his brother, but nothing but a horror that he's going to have the duty to cut down. So even with Toma's declarations that he'll become a Makai Knight to stop his brother, yeah, second he becomes a horror again in the ultimate fit of irony and most devastating moment that Ginga the horror could do this to Ginga Mikage. And it literally breaks him. He can't even stand up. He doesn't even have the will in him to slit his own throat to stop the horror Ginga from ever getting free or actually having his reincarnation. He is that broken. And in a way, this makes sense because he's not exactly been on an arc this series. He's just been trying to deal with the trauma of having to kill his father and putting all of his faith into this thing that he doesn't want explained or explored. As episode Faith's title is Blind Faith / Skeptical Doubt. He wants to blindly believe in his power, but any chance that others can doubt it, he over time becomes more reactionary too, because that doubt is in him of what if it's really not. And this is ultimately the result of not learning of what it was beforehand, before all of these tragedies could come about. It is ultimately a story of one man's hubris and desperately trying to hang on to what he has in the wake of severing those connections. And I think that finally explains what I felt this series was missing all this time. It was ultimately a story about false hope, and there wasn't really, like the normal Garo series, a feeling of a light of hope that banishes the despair, a feeling of that same type of resolve. It's people constantly questioning their fates and directions, and while it feels repetitious, it's because they honestly don't want to take that next step to actually calling themselves or those around him on it. And the only one that seems to is Rosin, and he does it because he lost someone close to him and is inevitably being held back by everyone else who wants to believe and doesn't want to call it out. So this ultimately becomes a story of failure between people who are just so tired of this big war between the horrors and knights, because it's gone on forever, that they want to take this chance, and they shouldn't have taken the chance, or at least looked at it more closely like they would have in other series, because no other big Makai Knights were around to actually deal with it. So it's ultimately a tragic story because practically everyone ends up dead. Well, the watchdog doesn't end up dead, nor does one of the Makai priests that's been involved here, whose names I could not remember. I think the watchdog's name is Kells, but either way, there are only two survivors of this, as Ginga the Horror is fully revived. Amelie got what she wanted with her lover back. They are back in the world doing horror things, as if the events of Garo Goldstorm put no hamper on their ultimate goals, whatever they end up being, or whatever final result their machinations will bring them. Whether that means they'll be appearing in another series and taking on the next lineage of Garo bearers in the time period they're now in is subject to debate, but it's definitely a different story in the franchise where usually the good guys win out. And Garo as a franchise is one of those settings where you can end with a bittersweet ending. You can end with everybody in majestic triumph, or you legitimately could show a story like this where evil wins in like a non-cataclysmic setting. I think this is practically the first story where it didn't end on the risk of some type of cataclysm or shift negatively towards the status quo. The only other one I can think of is Zero Black Blood, where it didn't have that high of stakes, but was more a argument over how to deal with horrors. Obviously, I reviewed that late last year because it's the beginning of January now, so I obviously had a bunch to say on that. But yeah, every other major Garo event. Oh, that's what I was thinking of. This is a lot like the Garo side story Kiba, where it was all about Barago's backstory, which obviously does not have a happy ending at the end of that, but it segues into the ending of his story at the end of the original chapter of the Black Wolf series. So it is kind of like that, except unlike that one, we don't know where it's going. So, Ginga and Amelie going off into the moonlight to do whatever they want. Since they're cannibal horrors, are they going to devour more horrors? Are they going to devour other normal people? Are they going to do the punish the truly selfish and wicked, as both Amelie and Ginga seem to be egging them on to do? In fact, that was one of the big debates this series. Should the truly selfish and malicious people that create horror gates be allowed to live themselves? Why do the Mechanites not police those people as well? Obviously, we know the answer, because they're still human, and the rule they lie under is they don't go after humans, because then they're judge, jury, and executioner of something other than themselves. I phrased that wrong. They are not the ones protecting humanity. They become lords of humanity that way, with the power they then invoke over them, which was, again, part of Jinga's own arrogance, as was garnered over the series. And this episode clarifies as well that Jinga's change in actions with how he was dealing with the horrors and just going off to cut them down on his own without the Watchdog's permission, past that, after that priest died, yeah, that was not Horror Jinga's influence. That was Ginga Mikage buying into his own hype to prove to himself and others that his power was actually real, and it wasn't. He created more victims because he refused to let anybody actually look at his power out of fear of what it would be for Toma, what it would mean for Toma. And just, I keep coming back to the same point. It is ultimately a tragedy of how he just couldn't accept reality. So, yeah, series ends, and the ultimate result is Horror Jinga allows Toma's horror form to devour the power of all these other horrors into a pseudo-super horror. I mean, it's definitely a tier higher than normal horrors. Not exactly Mado horror, and definitely not Messiah horror. Messiah-class horror, I should say. But it's otherwise a challenge for Ginga in his fully realized horror knight, state, and I think that's what he wanted as a final challenge versus, potentially taking on the horror formed Toma as a small expansion to his family of pseudo horrors, kind of to replace the son that the original Ginga in the Yamiro Mono and Goldstorm timeline had happened to his and Amelie's son. I'm actually surprised it didn't go that route with it and calming down Toma's horror form enough to make him return to being in human form, and then having him, you know, his current changed horror state make him a twisted self as well, to show the potential of the whole Dark Knight thing that they seem to be going for with this. And like, humans are shit, let's get rid of the worst offenders kind of thing, and deal with horrors that way, which was kind of a thing they were doing there, come to think of it. In Goldstorm, there's a lot to say on Goldstorm. But yeah, I'm not going to say that was a surprising twist, as we've been hemming and hawing back and forth on what the eventual direction of this was, but I, for one, was kind of expecting this to go the Messiah route, or for Ginga to make the heroic sacrifice. I was not expecting the shutdown like this. You could logically see it develop from that, as Toma has been his berserk or major loss button since the showcasing of the second episode on that, which I'm again looking at the wiki, and yeah, in retrospect, the episodes read destruction, despair, determination, doubt, stupor. You definitely see the readings of the different titles differently in wake of the ending. Hell, the first and last episodes have the same translation: destruction, rebirth, and destruction, creation. Okay, not quite the same, but definitely different intended, the same outcomes. Rebirth of Ginga, creation of Ginga, destruction of the human form, destruction of the human form. It laps back on itself, but with a different context to all of that. Gotta say, for the Makai Order going forward, they're definitely going to be watching out for anybody with those scars. The absolute last scene of this series, though, it's a pseudo cliffhanger. The Makai priest that survived all of this is laying everyone to rest and retrieving Alva's ring from where Mikage Ginga dropped it, in thinking that she betrayed him as well. And it pans over to something in the ruins where they're at, where all of this took place, and that golden sparkles are coalescing down on something. Now, this connects to two scenes I didn't discuss in this kind of meandering recap. The first was when Ginga the Horror kills Ginga Mikage, in that there is this kind of Star Wars Force Ghost impression of how human Ginga died, and how he was lit with light and his Makai Knight magic coat was left behind, and it seemed to sparkle slightly in kind of this ethereal glow. I'm mispronouncing that. Ethereal glow. I don't know why I screwed up saying that. And most of that seemed to be sucked into Ginga before it was all consumed. Like, Ginga Mikage was his light side, Ginga the Horror was his dark side, and the type of horror that Ginga the Horror is requires him to consume that light within himself, I think. Or this just killing his other persona. But by that jacket being left behind, does that mean there's some type of essence of that Ginga left over? The other scene I didn't talk about is when Ginga the Horror finishes his battle with Toma's horror form. It splits into glowing sparkles and the normal horror shadow. Now, since Ginga ended up doing this purification of light and darkness, and left the light and the human forms of the people who were turned into horrors to go about, is this light remnants of them, as well as an expression of all of his victims, or is this Toma's own righteous spirit uncorrupted by that of other horrors? Because, like we were saying, like I said, when Toma transformed into his horror form again, his last statement before doing so was he would cut down all horrors, which again is why I started on this tangent of possibly Horror Ginga using Horror Toma as a means to complete the familial relationship from the one that was lost in the Yamaro Terasumoto and Goldstorm timeline. Honestly thought that was the way they were going about it, because cannibal horrors are not a common occurrence. They have stressed this in all of the previous incarnations, that if a horror is eating another horror, then something strange is happening. And instead, Ginga just uses it as a punching bag before eating it himself. And then those gold sparkles happen. And at the end of the series, those same type of gold sparkles are going into some type of container or resting place. So, obviously this is sequel begging for something. So, did the essence of Ginga Mikage become separate from Ginga the Horror and was just left down there, and these gold sparkles are the remnants of Toma's will reviving him so he can fight his darker self that is now split from him? Or are they going a completely different route with this, and this is the key to defeating Ginga in that timeline? We don't know. We have no teases for anything that jumps off from Kami no Kiba Jinga. Hell, to my awareness of what's coming next in the Garo franchise, the only thing that's been teased, and admittedly has been teased for years, is the Raiga sequel movie for Makai no Hana, which it occurs in the 2020s, whereas the Goldstorm and Yamato Trasumono occur, where those occur is sometime in the 2200s, and this is farther on than even that. So if they're going to be sequel begging for this series, we have no advertisement of that happening, nor is there an idea of what's coming next beyond the Raiga movie that's been stuck in development hell for half a decade. I honestly don't know what they're going to be doing next with the Garo franchise. I haven't seen any advertisement for what they're doing next in the Garo franchise. The wiki I have on here just... Oh, not even the wiki seems to... Oh, Gecko no Tabibito. Yeah, that's the Raiga movie that they have been teasing for literal years, that hasn't had a promotional thing since 2015, 4 years ago. So yeah, I don't know where they're going to be going with this, whether they're sequel begging or not. Which I guess just leaves me with my final thoughts. Is Kami no Kiba Jinga a good series? I honestly... Oh, okay. I think it works as a tragedy, but as a truly clever series, not really. It was pretty basic and kept hitting something of the same beats again and again, and didn't always seem like they were really working to advance the characters. Most of what they did that was standout was in isolation to everywhere else on the seeming progression. In fact, with how it ends up, it kind of makes it seem either pointless as it needlessly diverges, or strengthens the tragedy that resulted, because these were people with lives and ambitions that were cut short because everyone was so short-sighted about not looking into this potential power as dangerous thing. I think this series is pretty divisive. I've heard pretty polarizing opinions on it between the various tokusatsu groups on whether they've liked it or not. I've started being a bit more present in one of the forums, but like with my scheduling, it's like I only check with them once every couple weeks, and the opinions were pretty polarizing, all things considered. Like I'm looking at the positivity polling list on it, and they're averaging 4s and 2s between the various episodes. So it's definitely a eclectic mix-up of whether people were positive or negative on it. And I've tried to stay positive on it because I tend to like most of the Garo content, no matter the quality fluctuation. And yeah, I really haven't felt like I've gotten a good opinion down on whether I really liked this at the end of the day or not. At the very least, Masahiro Inoue did give a really good performance all the way through, and I'd like to see him back again. I kind of feel like this might have gotten cut a bit short from one final episode, even though if you include the episode 0, it was a 13-episode series. Like, there might be something of a wrap-up in the future, depending on his scheduling. I know he's going to be doing another stage performance. I've stopped keeping track of Zio entirely, so I have no idea if he's still cameoing over there, but whatever. It takes a while for most of the Garo content to get out, so it might just not be something that's scheduled yet for a sequel to this or whatever they're going to be doing next. Maybe they'll be finally introducing a 4th Garo bearer into the live-action continuity. No, wait, actually they had that one special with that other guy, and there was Koga's dad, but I'm meaning a 4th protagonist that bears the Garo armor instead of just the amount of differing people who have worn it. Who knows? They kind of keep having to write themselves in corners every time they get new protagonists for this, as the live-action timeline's the live-action timeline's kind of getting crowded. And it's even more crowded when you start factoring in the anime continuity stuff, depending on whether that counts or not. Again, as I've addressed elsewhere, we have not had confirmation either way on that. So yeah, sorry about a bit of the rambling at the end and through this, but this is going to be the last Tokusatsu vlog I have for a while, at least unless I start doing vlogs on the Ultraman animated series that is coming to Netflix pretty soon, which I could do, but they wouldn't really be Tokusatsu vlogs. I have all of the Shout Factory DVD sets for the Ultra series that they released. I could potentially go through stuff like that. Or considering I have a lot of projects I need to be working on, I might just not do vlogs until something goes live again entirely. Admittedly, I could finally go back and do all the stuff with Ultraman Rube, but it still hasn't had progression on its translation since they stopped it a while back, so I can't actually actively work on that, and by the time I would, it would be ridiculously outdated. Ultraman Rube actually concluded at the same time Kami no Kiba Jinga did, so feels like there's not much point going back to that at the moment. But regardless, I'll be having regular content up again soon, just with other stuff, and definitely different than this, so maybe the time away from all this will be good or not. Regardless, thanks for watching. Thanks for supporting the show. I am Shinta, and I will see you all next time, whenever that comes.